When Shaquille O'Neal walked through the glass door of First Southern Community Bank on a Tuesday morning in February, the branch smelled like carpet cleaner and recycled air, and something faintly institutional. The specific smell of a building that processes important things quietly, without drama, the way important things prefer to be processed. The carpet was burgundy. The drop ceiling was the color of old cream. 2 teller windows were open. A woman in her 60s was at the first window counting bills with the focused precision of someone who has counted bills for a long time and no longer needs to look at her hands to do it. The second window was staffed by a younger man who was saying something to a colleague off to the side and had not yet noticed the door open. There were 4 people in line ahead of Shaq. He took his place at the back. He was wearing dark jeans, a plain olive-green jacket zipped halfway, and white canvas shoes with no logo visible. No watch, no rings. He had a single folded slip of paper in his jacket pocket, a withdrawal form he had filled out in the car, in his own handwriting, the way his grandmother had always done it. He stood in line with his hands in his pockets, and he waited. That is when he noticed the first thing. On the wall beside the teller windows, a framed photograph had been hanging long enough that the wallpaper behind it was slightly darker at the edges, where the frame had protected it from years of light. The photo showed the branch at what appeared to be its opening, a ribbon cutting, maybe 40 people gathered outside the door, a banner across the front that was too faded now to read fully. He looked at it for a moment, filed it, said nothing. He moved forward in line. The second thing was at the desk near the branch entrance, a placard on a stand that read, Earl Dupree, Branch Manager, and below the name, in smaller print, EST 1971. Not the bank's established date, the manager's. 52 years at the same branch. He looked at it for 2 seconds, looked away. The third thing was visible through the glass partition of the manager's office at the back of the branch. A small ceramic figurine on the corner of the desk, a pelican painted blue and gold, the kind that is sold at every Louisiana gift shop but kept only by people with a reason to keep it. His grandmother had owned one exactly like it. He had bought it for her at a gas station in Baton Rouge in 1992 when he was 19, with $7 he had left over after filling the tank. She had kept it on her windowsill until the day she died. He looked at the one on the manager's desk for 3 seconds. Then the line moved, and he moved with it, and he said nothing. Nobody in that branch knew what Shaquille O'Neal knew that Tuesday morning. He had been making this visit every year for 11 years, always on February the 7th, his grandmother Odessa's birthday, always in plain clothes, always in person, in line, the same as anyone else, always the same branch on Airline Highway in Baton Rouge, because Odessa had opened her account here in 1971 and had never moved it, not when the branch changed ownership twice, not when a newer location opened 6 blocks away, not when people told her she could do everything online now and didn't need to come in. She had told them that she liked coming in, that she liked the carpet, that she had started something here and she was going to keep it here. She had died in 2013 at the age of 81 with a savings account at this branch that had held, at its peak, $4,037, every dollar of which she had deposited herself, in person, with a paper form she filled out in her own handwriting, sitting at the small desk near the window that was still there, still in the same place, with the same pen on the same chain. Shaq had kept the account open after she died. He had moved $11 million into it the year after. He had moved more each year since. The account now held $47 million. He had never told anyone at the bank who he was. He came in once a year on February the 7th, and he made a withdrawal in the amount of $19.71. The year Odessa had walked through this same door for the first time. and he deposited a handwritten note into the safe deposit box she had maintained that said only, "Happy birthday, Grandma. I haven't forgotten." He had been doing it for 11 years. He had never once been recognized. Trust us, you are not going to see this ending coming. Stay with us for the whole video, because what happens at that teller window in the next 30 minutes involves a laugh that travels further than the person who made it intended. A manager who has been at the same desk for 52 years, and a connection between a grandmother's first deposit and her grandson's life that no one in that branch was prepared to find out about at 9:14 on a Tuesday morning in February. Odessa O'Neill was born in 1932 in a small town outside of Shreveport, Louisiana, in a house with a tin roof that sang in the rain and a porch that caught the evening breeze, and a mother who had taught her, before she could read, that money is not what you spend, it is what you keep, and then what you build on top of what you kept, and then what you pass to someone who will know what to do with it because you showed them. Odessa had married young and been widowed young and raised her children mostly alone, cleaning houses on the north side of Baton Rouge during the week and doing alterations for a tailor on weekends. And she had taken every dollar she did not immediately need and walked it to First Southern Community Bank on Airline Highway and deposited it with a paper form and a please and a thank you. She did not think of this as extraordinary. She thought of it as the minimum. She applied the same standard to how she loved, completely, without announcement, without requiring acknowledgement, as though love were also something you deposited regularly and let sit and trusted to grow. When Shaq was 8 years old and staying with her for the summer, she sat him down at her kitchen table and said, "Baby, a quiet account speaks louder than a loud mouth ever will." He was 8. He thought she was talking about the bank. He spent the next 40 years understanding that she had been talking about everything. She had never seen him play a professional game. Her eyes had begun failing her in the early 90s, and she refused to watch things she could not fully see because, she said, if you can't see it properly, you can't appreciate it properly, and if you can't appreciate it properly, you might as well not bother. But she had listened on the radio, and she had told everyone at her church and her neighborhood and the teller window at First Southern that her grandbaby was going to do something with his life that would make people pay attention. And she said it with such unqualified certainty that people believed her, even in the years before there was any evidence to believe. Kevin Marsh was 26 years old. He had been at First Southern for 9 months, long enough to feel comfortable and not long enough to have learned what comfort can cost. He was good-looking and knew it, quick with a comment and knew that too, with the easy social confidence of someone for whom confidence had never had consequences. He did not think of himself as unkind. He thought of himself as funny, which can be the same thing and is sometimes the opposite, depending entirely on which direction the joke travels. At 9:14 he called next, and the large man in the olive jacket stepped to the window and slid the withdrawal form across the counter. Kevin looked at the form. He looked at the amount, $19.71. He looked at the account number. He began entering it into the system. He was saying something to his colleague Dana at the adjacent station, something about the coffee, something ordinary, when the account loaded on his screen and he stopped in the middle of his sentence. He looked at the screen. He looked at the form. He looked at the man on the other side of the glass. He did not quite manage the laugh he made next. It escaped before he had finished deciding to make it. The specific, involuntary sound of someone whose face has processed something amusing before their judgment has had a chance to weigh in. But the judgment failed to arrive in time, and what came out instead was, 1971? He said it with the inflection of someone reading a punchline. From this account? He glanced at Dana. He did not look back at the man at the window when he said the next part, which is the detail that matters most. I've seen some withdrawals, but that's a new one. He was still smiling when he finally looked back up. Shaquille O'Neal looked at him. Not the smile of a man managing patience, not the expression of a man deciding whether to be angry. The face of a man who has heard exactly this note before, in exactly this key, and made a decision so long ago about how to answer it that the decision no longer requires any effort. "It's a specific number," Shaq said. "Take your time." The line behind him had 6 people in it. A woman named Bernadette Okafor, 54, a nurse at the hospital 2 miles away who came to this branch every Tuesday on her way to her shift, had heard the laugh and the comment from 3 people back. She had worked in rooms where people were made small for 31 years, and she had a specific sensitivity to the register of it, the frequency at which a public humiliation is packaged as humor. She looked at the back of the large man's head. She waited. An elderly man named Frank Tureau, 77, a retired schoolteacher who had been banking at First Southern since 1969, stood 2 places behind Bernadette and had also heard it. He was not the type to say anything in a bank queue. He was the type to remember things with exact fidelity and discuss them later in the appropriate setting. He filed it. He waited. Kevin entered the account details and began processing the withdrawal. The system ran the account balance. He looked at the screen for a moment longer than he needed to. Then he looked at the name on the account. Then he looked at the man on the other side of the glass. Something moved across his face that was not quite the thing he had been showing before. It arrived in stages, the way understanding arrives when it brings information the brain had not prepared to receive. He processed the withdrawal. He slid the receipt across the counter. He said nothing else. At 9:19, the door to the manager's office at the back of the branch opened. Earl Dupree was 73 years old. He was a small, careful man with white hair and a burgundy tie, and the deliberate movements of someone who had been in the same building for 52 years and knew exactly how far it was from every point to every other point without having to think about it. He had been looking at his screen when the account number appeared in the system's activity monitor, the alert function that flagged transactions on accounts above a certain threshold, a function that existed for compliance reasons, but that Earl had also, in practice, used for 52 years to keep track of the accounts he considered personal responsibilities. The O'Neal account had flagged. It flagged every February 7th. Earl always looked up when it flagged. He looked up now. He walked out of the office. He crossed the branch floor. He reached the teller window and he looked at the man on the other side of the counter, and he stood there for a moment with his hands at his sides. "Your grandmother," he said, "was Odessa O'Neal." It was not a question. Shaq looked at him. "I opened her account," Earl said. "February the 7th, 1971. First account of the morning." She was wearing a green coat, and she had a form she had already filled out at home, very neatly, because she said she didn't want to take too long at the window and make people wait. He paused. She deposited $43. She said she'd be back the following month with more. His voice had the particular quality of a man recounting something he has stored carefully for a long time and has been waiting, without knowing he was waiting, for the right occasion to take back out. She came back every month for 42 years. She never missed. He stopped. He looked at the man in the olive-green jacket for a long moment. "I knew your name before you ever walked in this building," he said. "She told me about you for 20 years. The branch was very quiet. Bernadette Okafor, 3 places back in the line, had her hand over her mouth. Frank Tureau had stopped being the type to say nothing in a bank queue. Kevin Marsh had gone the specific color of a person who has understood, too late, the precise nature of the room he was standing in. Shaq said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "She kept a pelican on her windowsill, blue and gold. I bought it for her in '92 at a gas station off I-10. Earl turned and looked at the ceramic pelican on the corner of his desk, visible through the glass office partition. He turned back. "She gave it to me," he said. When she retired the account, she said someone who'd been keeping her money safe for that long deserved something to remember her by. He paused. "I've had it 42 years. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the kind that has weight and temperature, the kind that a room holds when it has just witnessed something it did not have the vocabulary for 10 minutes ago and is still finding the words. Shaq looked at Kevin Marsh. The look contained no anger. It contained something more uncomfortable than anger. Clarity. The specific clarity of a man who has decided not to make a thing larger than it needs to be, which is its own form of power. "You're going to be fine," he said to Kevin, quietly. "The way you say it when you mean it is a choice, not a prediction. But you're going to think about this one for a while." Kevin said nothing. He nodded once. He would think about it for longer than a while. Shaq turned back to Earl Dupree. "I'd like to sit down," he said. "If you have a few minutes. I want to hear everything she told you." Earl Dupree had a few minutes. He had been waiting 52 years to use them correctly. They sat in the small office with the burgundy tie and the blue and gold pelican and the photograph on the wall of a ribbon cutting in 1971. 40 people gathered outside a door that was now the same door, on the same building, with the same carpet. And Earl told him about Odessa O'Neill, about the green coat and the $43 and the neatly filled-out form and the 20 years of monthly deposits and the things she had said about her grandbaby and what she believed he was going to become. He talked for 31 minutes. Shaq listened to all of it without interrupting once. Bernadette Okafor made her deposit and walked to her car and sat in it for 4 minutes before driving to the hospital. She was not late. She had given herself extra time without knowing why. The pelican stayed on Earl Dupree's desk until he retired the following spring. At his retirement party, held in the branch lobby after closing, Shaq sent a card. Inside it was a single sentence in his own handwriting. "She told me someone who keeps something safe for that long deserves to be remembered." Below it he had signed his name. Below that he had written one more line. She was right. She usually was. Earl framed it. He hung it where the pelican had been. What happened in that branch on a Tuesday morning in February was not about the laugh. It was not about the balance. It was about a woman in a green coat who walked through a glass door in 1971 with $43 in a neatly filled-out form and a belief that what you kept and what you built and what you passed forward was the whole point, and a grandson who had been listening to her since he was 8 years old at a kitchen table in Baton Rouge and had never once stopped. "Baby, a quiet account speaks louder than a loud mouth ever will." She had been right. She was usually right. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And tell us about someone in your life who deposited belief in you before you ever earned it. If this one reached you the way we think it did, hit that like button, because this story deserves to travel further than our subscribers. We are building something here, a community of people who understand that the quietest accounts hold the most. And if that's you, subscribe and come be part of it. The next video is already waiting. We will see you there.